resources. Let me just divert for just a second. I used to work for the mayor of the city of Osaka in Japan. I was in the International Relations Department. And I'll tell you guys, on almost a weekly basis, they would say, you don't know what you're blessed with in the United States. You have the most abundant endowment of resources in the world. And you know, Japan, this island country about the size of California with about 180 million people, and a mountain range kind of like the Rocky Mountains running through the middle of it, has no resources. And they look at us and say, look at your abundant blessing of resources. Well, it is. We do have that. So does that sound familiar to anybody? Not keeping your promise, can't educate our kids, we don't have the tax base, can't grow the economy, you're hoarding all of our resources. Well, guess what? That was Illinois. That was Missouri. Arkansas, Louisiana, Indiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida. In fact, Florida, and by the way, this is all on the website, the American Lands Council website. This information, the original documents, you can go back and look at the original documents. Florida, in their resolutions to the United States, to the Congress, said we're the worst off of all the western states. Think about your geography for a second. Right? We're the worst off of all the western states because you're not disposing of our land like you promised. Well, you've seen the map. Look at Illinois. Is it 90% federally controlled? No, it's less than 5%. They refused to be silent. They refused to take no for an answer. They banded together. But more importantly, they knew their history and they knew their rights. And they refused to be silent. It took years. But they're less than 5% federally controlled today. Let me show you some of the documents, okay? This is the Congressional Public Lands Committee. Listen to what they say. As these states and counties and people banded together, let me tell you what they did, okay? And this is a model for us. The people, every time they talk to their good county commissioners, say, how are we going to take care of our kids? How are we going to educate our kids and grow our economy and take care of our lands? Have access to our lands. And same, guys, same problems. They had to, it's so amazing. You look at these historical documents, and you look at the documents they're talking about, they're singing our song. Look at what they say, okay? This is to the Congressional Public Lands Committee. After resolutions from counties and states and people, every time they meet with somebody from Washington, when are you going to keep your promise and dispose of our lands? Like you promised at statehood. And I'll get in and show you some of these promises. But they refused to be silent. They banded together and they refused to be silent, from the individual to the city to the county to the state. They refused to be silent. Look at what they say. If these lands are withheld from sale, which is the effect of the present system, in vain may the people of these states expect the advantages of well-settled neighborhoods so essential to the education of our youth. Those states will, for many generations without some change, be retarded in their endeavors to increase their comfort and wealth. Look at this statement. Because they have not the power incident to all sovereign states of taxing the soil to pay for the benefits conferred upon the owners. When these states stipulated not to tax the lands of the United States until they were sold, they rested upon the implied engagement of Congress to cause the lands to be sold within a reasonable time. No just equivalence has been given those states for a surrender of an attribute of sovereignty so important to their welfare and an equal standing with the original states. I love this last sentence. It says, a remedy for such great evils. I can say I completely agree with Congress for at least once. A remedy for such great evils may be found in simply carrying into effect the spirit of the federal Constitution, which knows of no inequality in the powers or rights of the several states. Now let me just stop for just a second. Back then, and when we were made states, the word dispose is what's in the Constitution, and that was the duty of the federal government, to dispose. Dispose means sell, or, as is in your Enabling Act and our Enabling Act, extinguish title. Means get rid of it. Now, to Michigan, they gave them 14 million acres. To Hawaii, they just gave them all the land. right to the state. So it doesn't have to be sold privately. This is what they're talking about in this report. In the bill that we passed in Utah, we call for federal public lands to be state public lands. For multiple use, sustained yield with local planning. That's what was promised in FLPMA, Federal Land Policy Management Act, and that promise has not been kept either. But think about it. You guys have your school trust lands, we have our school trust lands, state-managed lands. We generate billions of dollars for our school kids. On the state trust lands that we control as public lands, generate billions of dollars. And hunters access the land, and fishers access the land, and grazers access the lands managed by the state. We're doing it already. We're already doing these things, right? So think about that. That was the Congressional Public Lands Committee report. But point out just a couple things. The power incident to all sovereign states. So what that's saying is, if you don't have your lands and you don't have the ability to tax your lands, you're something other than a sovereign state. Or you have something less than the power of a sovereign state. And then they say it again down here, no just equivalence has been given those states for a surrender of an attribute of sovereignty. This idea of controlling the lands within your borders and being able to tax the lands and confer the benefits is by definition what it means to be a sovereign state. If you're not, you're something else. I don't know what that is, but you're something else. Now this is Missouri. Now this is, guys, I'm just showing you a couple of examples. If you go on the website, there's what we call them quick facts. So you can go right to the original documents in that. But quick fact number 5, you can pull up these original documents. You've got the reports of Congress, you've got the resolutions of these states. I'll tell you what, I can give you a homework assignment. Look at the Illinois resolution, the state of Illinois. Beautiful, beautiful 1830s, 40s language. But basically what they said is, you've got to transfer our land or else. They went through the details on what they did, but think about it, they succeeded because they refused to be silent. Oh, I didn't read this one to you. So this is the Missouri resolution, because again, they banded together as a group of states. The present condition of the western states, right? Remember your geography again. Present condition of the western states, state of Missouri never could have been brought to consent not to tax the lands while they were not sold, and not tax the lands until 5 years thereafter. That was the reasonable time that they expected the lands to be disposed of in their state. If it had been understood by the contracting parties that a system would be pursued which would prevent 9/10 of those lands from ever becoming property of persons in whose hands they might be taxed. Missouri was federally, 9/10, 90% federally controlled for decades, less than 5% today. Why? Why? They knew their history, they knew their rights, they banded together, and they refused to be silent. They refused to take no for an answer. So it's already been done. This has already been done. Look at them, right? Look at Illinois right here. You know? They were 90% federally controlled. They were 90% federally controlled. It's already been done. Second point, the same. Now you'll hear people say, you gave up your land. You just didn't want it. Look at your contract of statehood. It says, the people inhabiting the state forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated public lands lying within the boundaries thereof. You ever heard that? Well, I went to public school, but there's just a comma after that. There's not a period there. And again, I went to public school, but I understand that means the sentence isn't over. You interested in what the rest of the sentence is? Now that's all the people that want to just throw something out and say, don't even look behind this. Look, you forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated public lands. Look at the rest of the sentence. Until title thereto shall have been extinguished by the United States. They're subject to disposition, which means and meant then to dispose, to transfer away title, to extinguish title. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story. I had, when we were running the legislation that we passed, the Transfer of Public Lands Act, I had someone from Washington come up and they said, Representative Ivory, this is all interesting what you're doing, but I'm sorry to tell you it never happened. I said, well, thanks, I've been working really hard on this. I wish you'd gotten to me sooner. He said, I said, so maybe you can tell me why it's not ever going to happen. He said, well, you know, at statehood, we had a Mormon issue at statehood, and so we had to give up claim to our lands. I said, really? Yeah. I said, well, where'd you get that? What's in the Enabling Act? You know, the contract of statehood. I said, well, I've read that a couple times. I never saw that anywhere. Well, it's there. I said, maybe you can help me out. Right there where it says, forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated public lands. That's because we had a Mormon issue at statehood. I said, well, gee, I didn't realize that Colorado, oh, and by the way, South Dakota and North Dakota and Oklahoma and Louisiana, I didn't realize they had a Mormon issue at statehood, because that same language, that exact same language is in their enabling acts. But see, we've accepted, without looking behind the documents, we've accepted when someone says, read a half a sentence to us and said, you forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated public lands, as if there's a period right there. And they don't bother to look at the other sections that say 5% of the proceeds of the sales of the public lands which shall be sold shall be given to the Permanent Fund for Education. So think about this for just a second. There's a law review article on the website. I would encourage you, if you have a sleepless night, to read it. I've got a 5-page summary I got to get on the website. But the law review article done by the Federalist Society, the nation's largest group of constitutional lawyers, libertarian lawyers, commissioned this law review article. And here's what they said in this. They said that forever disclaim language, this was a contract between sovereigns. Does it make any sense that in a contract between sovereign states, when all of that on the eastern side, they disposed of all their land, does it make any sense that the people that founded Colorado and Utah and Idaho would say, we don't want all that land? I mean, come on, this is back in the 1800s when men were men, right? I mean, does it make any sense that they just said, we didn't want all that? No, it doesn't make sense. Just from on its face, it doesn't make sense. But think about what they do. Anybody in real estate here? There's probably a bunch of guys in real estate. If you've got any question about who owns property, but you want to go transfer it somewhere, but there's a cloud on the title, how easy is it going to be to transfer that property? If there's a cloud on title that we're not quite sure what rights this party may have, we're not quite sure what rights that party may have, it's going to be harder to transfer title, right? Same situation. In fact, there's a statement, a history by President Andrew Jackson on the website, another homework assignment for you. It's on the resources tab of the website. Greatest, concise, contemporaneous history of what was supposed to happen and what was intended constitutionally and from the trust agreements that they had. By the way, Supreme Court for decades, centuries, called this relationship that the federal government holding title, they called him a trustee. But what the law review article talks about, and what President Jackson and the history, and even the Supreme Court talks about, was federal government held the land in trust for the states ultimately to be created. But if you clear title to the trustee, then think about it. It's easier to transfer title, you get a higher price. Why would we want a higher price? Because 5% of the proceeds go to education. And once the property is disposed of, had they done that back when we were made a state, back when they were selling the land, now we're 100 years down the road and we want to, those public lands will become state public lands, we'll manage them that way. But had you done it that way, the tax revenue that you get is much higher. This forever disclaim language was for our own benefit. You'll be able to transfer the land faster, at a higher price, more money for schools, more tax revenue to the states once you dispose. All kinds of historical documents and records on that. But the promises are the same. Now look at this over here. This will tell you how crazy this is, okay? This will tell you just how crazy this is. On the right is the language of the Enabling Act of North, South Dakota, Montana, and Washington. Not just the same language, it's the same document. Those 4 states have the same document as their Enabling Act. Well, guess what? North and South Dakota says forever disclaim too. And yet the federal government disposed of all the land. North Dakota's 3% federally controlled. North Dakota controls 100% of the access on their land for mineral development and all the rest. Guess what? North Dakota gets to keep 100% of the mineral lease royalties. Colorado, 48%. Oh, but no, not 48%, because when the federal government gets in trouble in its finances and it's going to go through sequestration, it's going to take this obligation that it has to pay that it committed, because it says you're not going to develop your own minerals, but we're going to give you a promise to give you the mineral lease. Right now in sequestration, they're cutting that money back. Not the budget and appropriations from the federal government. They're taking revenues right away from the cities and the counties and the states. It's also happening on PILT, right? PILT. Incident of sovereignty to control and tax your lands to confer the benefits. Well, in 1976 with FLIPMA, after 200 years of this trust history of disposal, Congress said it's now our policy to dispose of these lands. To retain the lands. But we're going to give you a payment in lieu of taxes. We're going to give you that promise. Well, payment in lieu of taxes, how does that equate, commissioners here? How does that equate to what your average taxable value would be?
It's a fraction.
Fraction, about 15 cents on the dollar if you're lucky. Now, even PILT, so the federal government says, hey, don't worry, we're not going to dispose of the land anymore like we're obligated, but we're going to give you a promise to make payments in lieu of taxes. Well, that promise isn't sacred either, because that's now being subject to sequestration. Again, not the federal spending being cut, but taking money right out of classrooms and roads and public services in our counties and our states. It's also happening on SRS. Now, it's even worse on SRS, Secure Rural Schools money. If you have a county where you're blessed with the forest resources, and you would, like we talked about, that nice symbiosis where you could harvest the trees, create a better spacing in your forest, use the revenue from the trees to educate children. The federal government said, you can't do that because you can't do that. But we're going to give you a promise that's called Secure Rural Schools. And we're going to give you that promise until you can come up with some new economy. You're going to hear Senator Murkowski here in just a minute on this, just a couple weeks ago. But now they're saying not only are we going to cut back the SRS, this solemn promise supposedly that they made, we're going to go back and make you pay back the Secure Rural Schools money that we've already given you. But guess what? You got a choice. You got a choice. You can choose whether or not you want to have that money deducted from future federal payments, or they'll send you a bill and send you to collections. Those letters just went out to your governor a couple weeks ago. This is happening right now. This is happening right now. So it's already been done before, and the promises are the same. Let's see, I just lost my thing. Oh, that's why. And I would submit to you that this is the only solution big enough. It's the only solution big enough. It's already been done before. The promises are the same. It's the only solution big enough. I can't keep up with this. I mean, this is 16 trillion. Look at that. That's the national debt, right? And that's not all of it, because that's just the debt on the books. You've got the unfunded obligations that are somewhere north of 85 trillion and still overspending at $1 trillion a year, right? So this is Colorado. 24.8 billion in annual revenue. 11.4 billion is federally sourced. So that's the looming budget hole that we're already seeing. Those cutbacks are already coming. You know, your PIL payments over the years have been going down. Your Secure Rural School payments had already been going down. But the federal funding, where they're in that kind of shape, you don't have to be an accountant to know that there's some serious business ahead for us. So let me tell you a tale of two states, and we've kind of talked about this already. So we'll just go Utah and North Dakota. I think Colorado, I think you were made a state before North Dakota. Were you not? What was your...
76?
What's that? Yeah, you think of how crazy this is. You're made a state before North Dakota. North Dakota is 1889. Utah's 1896, but our enabling act with North Dakota was 5 years apart. Same language with respect to disposal. You're made a state before North Dakota. So there again, North Dakota, federal government's disposed of all but 3% of the land. They get 100% of the mineral royalties. They get to control 100% of the access. They got 20,000 jobs just looking for people. They just put $3,700 per student above the national average into education funding. They're putting billions of dollars into schools and roads. I got a good friend up there, Betty Grandy, who's in the North Dakota House. She apologizes every time we talk because she's